It says we're live and alive, baby. So let's start recording.
Okay.
So be ready to talk for a minute once I toss to you, because while you do that, I'm going to try to get it shared out.
Okay. All right. Ready?
It says we're live and alive, baby. So let's start recording.
Oh,
All right, we're live.
it's always the delay there.
So be ready to talk.
All right. We're gonna go pod recording, and you're leading us in.
Yep.
Okay. Three, two.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with the Jungle Auburn podcast. I'm your favorite fill-in host, Ben, and Auburn is coming off a 25-point neutral site win over the UNC Asheville Bulldogs, 87-62. I'm here with your favorite full-time host, Matt Donaldson. And Matt, before we get into this, you're pulling double duty today. Did I hear rumors of you recording another podcast earlier today?
We did. Jackson and I got the kind of not last minute, but we at the last minute this afternoon, were able to interview Coach Cliff Ellis. So if you followed the pod for a while, we've had Bruce Pearl, we've had Sonny Smith, and we just talked to Cliff Ellis. There were a few little audio difficulties, but we had a really good conversation with him. We're going to post that in a couple of days, so be on the lookout for that before the USC game coming up. So
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
a
the
nice
plan
surprise.
Yeah, I think the plan for that episode is for it to come out on Fridays. So if you're looking for some weekend content to lead you into the USC game, that's what's going to be up, man. I don't know about you. I grew up with Cliff Ellis as my coach.
Yep.
I hopped into the chat for a minute to say I saved that copy of the Montgomery Advertiser from when his Auburn team made the Sweet 16.
Oh.
Oh, such good times.
And
So
I'll
Matt,
just
we're celebrating a big win.
no,
Oh no,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say the conversation was good. It was a lot about the 99 team, which our pod's been on the front end of trying to want to celebrate that team, 25 years since the number one seed, SEC champions, Flying Tigers, striped jerseys, all the things that Jackson loves. So we got to talk about that, and there's a lot of interesting stuff about Coach Cliff Ellis. He just retired. He's just turned 78, and he had a lot of awesome things to say about his time at Auburn. So be looking out for that. But you're right, Auburn beats UNC Asheville, continues the momentum off that win over Indiana in front of a, very vast majority Auburn crowd in Huntsville. Shout out to some of my Huntsville friends. Zach Barrett lives in North Alabama. He was there, and Jeffrey and Deborah Gaddis. Some cool opportunity to see Auburn basketball for some locals up there. And Auburn really put on a show, even if the shooting wasn't always there tonight.
And don't forget, if you're an Auburn fan and you're a fan of the Jungle Auburn podcast, reach out to us if you're going to be at one of the games. We just might let you do an Instagram live takeover for your halftime analysis. Remains to be seen. So, Matt, you wanted to talk a little bit about our shooting tonight. I was not a huge fan. It was only naturally we were going to come down to earth after an incredible game against Indiana, but we won by 25. How do we do that with a poor shooting performance?
Yeah, great point. One of the best things about this team so far this season to me is how many different ways we can win and how many different weapons we have. Really exciting to see. I think we only hit 2 threes in the first half, got a little better in the second, but it was turnovers. We dominated the turnovers category, and ultimately, I think UNC Asheville just couldn't handle our constant half-court defensive pressure. Even when we weren't forcing turnovers, it was just tough for them to get anything consistent going. And when you that we won the rebounding battle, and
Matt, you got to
ultimately
talk about the most important stat of all. It's been our lead all season. We don't want to bury it too far.
the
Talk to me
assists,
about the bench points. Oh,
bench,
no, no, no. That's
we're
you and
great
I's
at this.
personal.
Bench points.
We are great assists. We've been talking all year. We're 10 deep. We have 10 starters. We don't have 5 starters. We have 10 starters. What was the bench point differential?
Oh gosh, we had 51 bench points out of 87. I don't know what they had, but they
What?
didn't have 51. I'll tell you that because Pember had a chunk of their points. We're functioning. If
Not
you're
even
watching on
close.
YouTube, we have the slightly less superior box score, with only Auburn stats, but we do have plus minus, which is exciting today.
Whoa. Our
Um,
favorite stat.
but you're right, Ben. That's a great call out because the bench for this has happened in a lot of the recent games. When we go, like it is rare. I'm trying to think of past teams that can literally have all of their backups in at the same time. I remember you really focusing on that the last couple of years with our teams. Like we couldn't always do that. And at least in the non-conference section of our schedule, man, when we have Trey, KD, CBM, or Lior, Cheney, and Dillon in, that lineup is wreaking havoc, especially on the defensive end. And when you get 51 bench points from that group, I mean, that's just icing on the cake.
Yeah, we had some amazing stats from everybody's favorite ball of hate, Katie Johnson. We also saw some incredible quality minutes from Dylan Cardwell tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that was with Pember off the floor, which I definitely think helped. He went to the locker room a little bit early in the first half. But these are the type of things that are going to happen in college basketball games. And the question is, what do you do when the opportunity presents itself? And tonight, it was very clear the backups were absolutely ready to bounce. They brought the defensive energy. We finished with a total of 9 steals. We forced them into 14 turnovers while Auburn committed only 7. So we doubled them up in the turnover margin. And we also bullied them on the glass. We finished with 36 rebounds to their 26. And they only had 4 offensive rebounds the whole game. That's a great box out game. That's great action from your secondary players.
Wow, that's some good stuff. I mean, we really did, people always focus on the shooting, and it obviously is important. We had our group chat going about how important that is for the ceiling of this team, and I think that's a good discussion we can have. But great to be able to, I think I sent y'all something. Great to be up double digits against anybody at halftime when you don't feel like you shot it well and you made 2 threes. Like that is a sign that you're doing a lot of things well. And I think the thing I would call out is just how impressed I am with the demeanor and the physicality and the effort on the defensive end. It really is becoming contagious. They love getting 20, they're trying to get 5-second calls on the press. They love getting defensive blocks. They love forcing any sort of turnover. They celebrate it. They have like customized, they're doing the seatbelt thing from another sport. Like they're into it and they feed off it and the bench feeds off of it. So when you have a culture within your team where that side of the ball matters and we're going to celebrate locking people up and stopping them, like that is huge for this group. And because I was more concerned about our defense, honestly, this year. The offense, we know that's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster, but man, I'm really encouraged by not only the way we're defending, but the effort with which we're defending in a game like this, where even when it got out of hand, I mean, we were still pushing for more. And I love to see that.
Yeah, we ran probably more of the press than I think I've seen us run all season this year. And there were so many instances where we saw that lead directly to turnovers, whether it was directly on the inbounds play or it was creating an accelerated clock for the other team's point guard. Now you suddenly, instead of having 20 plus seconds when you get down the floor, you're looking at 17 seconds or 15 seconds. So you don't have as much time to run action and try to find a cutting lane. You got to get baskets now. And, although UNC Asheville may have seemed like a team that was overmatched, they were playing a ton of seniors. We heard that a lot in the broadcast tonight. This is an old, savvy basketball team. And I think we saw that in the initial opening 5 minutes. It was a pretty low scoring game to start. And our shooting was, let's just be honest, our shooting was abysmal in the first half. We closed the first half shooting 2 of 11 from 3, but we finished the game bringing those numbers up to 7 from 21, 33%. That's a pretty good shooting clip, especially compared to teams we saw last year.
Well, and let's not forget, this is another scheduling gem by our staff. UNC Asheville's predicted preseason to win the Big South. This could be an NCAA tournament team that Auburn just played in a neutral site. So, you can kind of look at UNC Asheville, and they do have a lot of experienced guards. Pember is a really good player that used to be in the SEC. Don't take for granted the 25-point drubbing that we just watched. As you mentioned right before we started recording, Northwestern just lost to a 3-9 really bad team on their home court. So, and
a bye game, the epitome of brutality.
Yes, shout out John Rothstein. Also shout out John Rothstein, who's been
no shout out for him.
Who's been really tricking people, including myself this week. So shout out. I mean, so this was such a balanced game. Honestly, it's going to be an interesting MVP conversation. Everybody kind of had their moments. I wouldn't say anybody, Trey ended up leading the team in scoring with 15. Some of that was because he was on the floor to the bitter end with the walk-ons, but he continues to play really well. Chad Baker-Mazara, had 11 points all in the second half after a 0 spot in the first half, but he showed what he's capable of, hitting 3 threes. Like, what were your thoughts on kind of who stood out to you? Because everybody shined at different points in this game.
Yeah, it's tough to say. Honestly, this is one of the unusual games where Janai Broom was pretty quiet offensively, but I almost want to give him the MVP. He didn't play a lot
Mm.
of minutes late, so he didn't fill out the stat sheet in the way that we normally do. But you look at his game, he had 6 rebounds tonight, 3 assists, a steal, and a block to go along with his 6 points. And some of his passes were incredible. When we were getting ready to blow the roof off the doors following Chad Baker Mazara's first three, we got the ball on a fast break to Janai in the center of the key, and he found Jalen on a beautiful backdoor cut. Fantastic bounce pass, easy bucket, 5 point swing. That really was when you felt like Auburn was beginning to run away with the basketball game.
He also led the team in plus minus, plus 18 when Janai Broom was on the floor. Everybody was positive tonight, but that's something. I would say, as a loyal Jalen supporter, if you're going to give Janai Broom the MVP, Jalen had more points, a couple less rebounds, but 2 steals, did his thing. Had a couple bad turnovers. Honestly, a pretty traditional, boring, bad Jalen night, but
Well, I
that
don't
the
want to say it was a
trial.
traditional boring bad Jalen night. I think Jalen came alive and actually did his damage in a more meaningful way. I think his 8 points were more impactful in the game than Trey Donaldson's 15. I think a lot of Trey Donaldson's time and scoring was in the garbage minutes. No slight on Trey; those are still important minutes in the game. But Jalen Williams' points came when it mattered, much in the same way that Denver Jones' points came when it mattered. Denver finished with 9 points tonight, but he was 4 of 8 from the floor. So his discipline in shooting was outstanding. My reason for not wanting to give Denver the MVP is my same reason for not wanting to give Jalen the MVP. He had some really sloppy turnovers that I think against a better team might have actually hurt us.
He did, but man, his shot looked good tonight from mid range, couple threes. I mean, it really looked like the pure shot that we really want to see from our guards. You mentioned wanting to see that consistent, reliable outside shooter, and I think that was a good game for him. KD did a lot of the
I,
same things that KD did last game. I love the role he has. It was he got that tech. They sat him for a half. It really threw off our mojo in that App State game a little bit. But if you look at the totality of the season, this feels like, again, knock on wood, we're only a third of the way through the year, but um, it feels like this is the team and the maturity level of KD, like accepting his role and thriving in it. Like he is consistently finding ways to create havoc and make more of those positive KD plays and less of the negative KD plays. We'll see how that goes throughout the year, but I really, really like what I've seen from him, and it was another good night for him in that regard.
yeah, the tricky part with KD last year was he would occasionally shoot us out of games, and we're seeing so much more discipline from him offensively. And I think that's because he trusts this team in a way that he might not have necessarily trusted last year's team, particularly our guard play.
Yeah,
KD only took 4 shots tonight. 2 of them were in the lane. 2 of them were from three. He hit one. So, like disciplined basketball overall, but he stuffed the stat sheet otherwise. 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 steals.
four
And
steals in
once again,
15 minutes. 4 steals in 15 minutes.
and once again, 0 turnovers. So although he can be an agent of chaos in both directions, for the last couple of games, he's been only an agent of chaos for the other team. He's made it impossible for them to execute in the way that they want to and move the ball in the half court in a disciplined way. He forces them to go where he wants to go, which is always exciting to see.
Absolutely. What about I mean, I continue. I know you're a Trey guy. I continue to just be impressed with what Trey and Aiden are kind of playing off of each other at that point guard position. They both bring different things. Trey continues to just engineer that unit of backups. Whoever's on the floor with Trey, I think Trey just plays really well with them. I think he's a bulldog defensively. He's got a little more size to him to defend on the perimeter. But man, he is he seems so content and patient on the offensive end. He's in control, and he's a year older than he was last year, and he's continues to impress me. I think he had a really good game again tonight.
And did you know that he also plays other sports? The announcers always want to remind us of that.
Love it. I love it. But let's talk about our guy, Jackson, giving CBM just he's buying in fully based on one half against UNC Asheville in a neutral site game. He says, CBM, this is what we need. He hit 3 threes in the second half. They looked beautiful. He got 7 rebounds, which to me really helps his MVP case in 19
No, no,
minutes.
no. Let's
He
let's not simplify it to just one game. Jackson's been watching CBM's game for a while, and we've seen flashes of this. And I think what was most impressive about him tonight is again, You don't want to fall too in love with the box score. Yes, it's pretty that he was one of our players that got into double digits. You know how much I love his free throw percentage and his ability to draw those fouls. But it's when the points came. And CBM was a guy that hit shots for us when we were in not quite a slump, but we were struggling to put the game out of reach.
Mm.
And those 3-pointers and his ability to drive and draw fouls were what really stretched the game for us tonight.
I do think that's a great point you made. When you look at the App State game, then the Baylor game, like we had opportunities in those games to either pull out a win or stretch out the lead. And when we're just not hitting it, we just need to hit a few of those well-timed threes or make a couple of those plays to really do that. And he was the catalyst in the second half again. And I'm, obviously huge to get offense from him and Chris Moore, by the way. 6 point. Any offense you get from Chris Moore is always helpful as well. But
Oh, yeah.
we're still playing Leor, so we're going to track that into SEC play because I do think eventually, if CBM's the guy that I'm still the cynical one. He still is getting bullied on defense sometimes. He is getting better on that end, in my opinion. He's giving good effort. He's fitting in well with the team. He is an athletic freak. He clearly can hit threes. His free throws are great. So he is rounding into good form.
And
I'm still
six of his seven rebounds tonight were defensive rebounds. So that's
yeah,
where his length really comes in.
yes, and that's huge. I mean, to lead the team in rebounding from that three position, we saw Flanagan do that a lot last year. So that's encouraging. And if I had to, and it really feels like a team MVP more than anything. I'm not leaning Janai. To me, watching the game, it felt like it's a Trey Denver CBM argument. And Cardwell
And
was
again,
terrific, by the way. Cardwell impacted the game in so many ways, like you mentioned earlier.
and let's not forget to shout out our hometown hero, Cheney
Yeah.
Johnson, fan favorite and favorite of our other sometimes guest hosts, Ryan Norman, finished 3 of 5 from the floor tonight. He hit both of his free throws, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block to go along with 0 turnovers. Cheney Johnson, welcome back to Huntsville and welcome to prime time with the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, you love to see it, right?
But you're right. Overall, we got contributions from everybody, and when you have a game like this that feels like a complete team effort, it really does come down to moments and momentum. And I think it's hard to argue with CBM's performance and his ability to really put this game away. That's what we've been looking for in these close matchups. Can we find somebody who's a closer, who has that aggressive instinct, who's going to go and step on the other team's throat and hit a step back contested three?
And he's got some of that KD energy. He's a little crazy like KD.
Just a little bit.
And it reminded me, again, he had 0 points when he started hitting the shots you're talking about. And it does take a unique mindset and player to step in confidently and hit those shots and have that instinct, like you said. So, and I think this is a good type of game for him to build some confidence and feel like, okay, like I, lead the team in rebounds. I'm scoring double digits off the bench. Like, I think this is hopefully a good step in his development, and I'm perfectly fine with him being the MVP. I do have to shout out Denver Jones too. Just five rebounds, no turnovers. And again, all these guys didn't have to play minutes, which you made a great point in our text that, hey, we're getting a lot of guys. Like Jalen played less than half the game. Janai played exactly half the game. So that's just
Denver Jones led us in minutes tonight with 23. He had a couple of bad turnovers, but he was a bucket tonight, and we got to give him the shout out for that because that's what we brought him here for.
but
But
see him.
I'm seeing no other votes in the group chat. So Matt, it's up to you and me, and I think we're both ready to crown him. Chad Baker Mazar, your first MVP from the
He's gonna
Jungle
love that.
Podcast.
He's gonna love that on social media. I
Congratulations.
can't wait to give it to him. I do
Yeah,
want to
me
shout
too.
out. I'm glad you mentioned that. Tucker Robinson, checking in, sending us some messages. He said he missed the game, but excited to hear us break it down. Love the jungle. He said it looked like we had a slower start from the score. Is the slow starts our secret ingredient to winning?
Well,
Not sure about
Tucker,
that.
yeah, and we're glad you missed the game because the secret to winning for us might be a terrible broadcast. If you're on Auburn Twitter at all, I think you saw everybody complaining about Huntsville's lack of preparedness for having a basketball game break out in the middle of their commercial for their fantastic city.
It was interesting. They had a radio crew from Birmingham doing it, and you never know what you're going to get on SEC Network Plus.
Truly.
So it was interesting, but it's a good point. I think this was like a tie game. I think UNC Asheville might have even led 19-18 or 20-19 or something like that. And Auburn really broke it open. It was good to see them get to that double digit lead. He does make a good point that we were down double digits last week early
Yeah.
before storming back. The thing, the one takeaway I would say from that is we are just so deep that it feels like the kind of team that we might be able to just expect a run at some point, right? Like you don't know when it's going to come. Is it going to be early in the game? Is it going to be late in the first half? Is it going to be second half? Are we going to wear people down with our press? Are we going to hit some threes that night? Are we just going to play really solid defense and grind some games out when the shots aren't falling? Like I think all those are possibilities, but when you've got 10 guys and they all have different skill sets on offense, like it just feels like it's so refreshing. And I hope this is true in conference play as well, that you really don't have to stress about Jabari and is he going to score? Because we really needed Jabari to score that late in that year where nobody else was really picking up the slack. Or Janai last year at times at the end, it was like, oh, we just need anybody to come up beside Janai and help score. And so far this year, it's felt like, 8 or 9 of these 10 can really help us offensively on any given night.
Yeah, Tucker, I had a similar question for Matt on last week's podcast. It seemed like the recipe for success might be for us to start a little bit slower. And I don't know if it's that as much as we're seeing that this team has a little bit of offensive inconsistency. And what they have found since the App State game is a reliance on their defense and understanding that if we stay locked in and keyed in defensively, they can't make tough shots forever. And you'd rather have them make those shots at the beginning of the game when they're fresh rather than when you've been running the press at them for 20 straight minutes and now they have to try to pull up and hit a tough shot. So
Yeah.
I think we're reaping the rewards of our defensive intensity and our commitment to playing the full 40 minutes, which is all you can ask of any team.
If you've listened to our podcast for the last couple of years, like I have this image, Bruce Pearl being at Auburn is such a big deal to all of us who grew up caring about Auburn basketball. And, from afar, before he came to the Plains, there were these Tennessee teams that he coached. And even if you go back before that, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and they all had this certain edge to them, this swagger. And so I almost find myself judging his teams at Auburn as like, which ones really feel like a Bruce Pearl team? I got to tell you, this team of all the 9 seasons is up there to me so far. And I mean that because I love that we're pressing more. I think we have the perfect lineup to do it. I think we can wear some people out with it, or at least create some havoc and help create some of those runs. You saw it last week against Indiana. So I love that piece. I love the depth. I love we're playing 11 guys. I love that they are confident offensively, even when they shouldn't be. That's a Bruce Pearl hallmark. And ultimately, they're just battling their tails off on defense. They really are. That the effort is there almost, 95% of the time on defense. And that's not always true early in the season. So as a guy who just really respects the heck out of Bruce Pearl and what his teams look like and what they do, I'll share this. One of my coworkers was at the Indiana game. He's an Indiana grad. And he said, when we were talking on Monday after getting back to town, and the thing about Bruce Pearl teams is they're just going to play really hard, and they're going to kind of challenge you to play as hard as them. And good luck playing as hard as Katie Johnson on the floor. Like good luck playing as hard as even Trey in some instances. And I really, really like how this team is rounding into form. I still have questions, I still have concerns, but it feels like a Bruce Pearl team, doesn't it? It just feels like it. We're underrated. We're not ranked. I
Yeah.
love it. Like nobody's paying attention to us. We're just able to develop. It's awesome.
We talked a lot in last year's preseason podcast about the idea of a 10 deep team. We thought bringing in some of this talent was going to make the difference. The Johans were going to be ready. The Chance Westry was going to be ready. Wendell was going to be amazing. We switched Zep to the 2 now. So we're going to have Zep and Wendell on the floor at the same time. It's going to be this incredible, deep, fantastic team. I was the only one who believed in Trey. Reminder for the record.
You are.
But I think we saw really in Cancun, especially in that Northwestern game, that this wasn't a true 10 deep team. We were missing offensive production all over the board. We had a black hole at 2 guard. We had a lot of problems at 3. Flanagan hadn't quite emerged into the role that we needed him to be last year and the role that he's playing this year now for Ole Miss as a real scoring threat, in addition to being an incredible athlete and rebounder. And when you look at the way that Cheney is developing, when you look at the way that Denver is fitting into a new role where he's not asked to score 20 and 30 and 40 points a night, you're really seeing guys buy into their roles all across the board at every single position. And I think much more so than any previous year, we really are too deep across the board.
It does feel that way. And it feels like pretty quality depth. I still have concerns about Cheney and SEC play. I still have some concerns about Chad Baker Mazara. Just because I just need to see it, and I need to see there is a level that gets ratcheted up. The SEC might not be the best conference at all, or even in that conversation this year, but there is a physicality. You saw it on that in the Indiana game, like the athletes and the type of game that you're going to play. What 18 SEC games against? It is a grind, and it does wear people out.
But
Um,
what's so fascinating to me about this team is you didn't see it tonight until a little bit later, but you really saw it early in that Indiana game, about midway through the first half. When the 3 pointers fall, this team just runs folks out of the gym. And you even saw that against App State. We talked about this a little bit. Nothing hit. And still, with 3 minutes left, we were in a great position to steal a game on the road against a tough opponent. So this team is only one or two shots really away from being in that comfortable position where you're up 20 with 10 minutes to go, or you're up 10 at the final TV timeout. And you just know that all you've got to do is stay disciplined and you can survive. And especially when you get late in conference play and definitely in March, that's so much of what it's about is the chess match of basketball. Everybody's going to go on a run. By the time you get to that field of 64, everybody's got talent. Everybody can make shots. It's when you make them and when you can make your stands defensively.
I love it, and you're so right. I really think if this team hit, I was having a nerdy debate about 3-point shooting percentages. We talked about how 38 would be wonderful. It would be wonderful. That's better than the Final Four team shot. It would be in the top, 5 or 10% of teams last year for the season. And then
All
you're
right,
like,
look,
well,
I may have been greedy. I may
no,
have
it's
been
okay.
greedy.
I want to be greedy, but I think it's interesting for people who have followed this team for a while. Like tonight, it didn't really feel like we, shot it super well. But honestly, like 33%, hitting a third of our threes, like that's higher than we've had as a season average since the Final Four team. So I think, any bit of that is improvement on what we've seen. So even a night like tonight, like that's okay. Like I'll take 33 is kind of my bar. And then obviously if you have a game like we saw against Indiana where you're hitting 50% of your threes, you're cooking with gas with our defense the way we're playing right now. How about
Yeah,
80% from the
it's
line, Ben? 80% from
oh
the team. We love it.
oh.
See it.
But
Ben's
my heart was broken. Trey Donaldson missed his first free throw of the year tonight.
brutal.
I knew he had to break my heart again. But you want to talk about free throws and their impact. Obviously, Auburn hitting 80% is an ideal number. We only shot 15 free throws. So I feel like in that range, you can expect to hit about that with this team. But you go back and look at UNC Asheville, and every time they started to mount a little bit of a run, or they would get a free hand from the refs in the form of a very strange technical on Janai Broom, or some of these fouls that used to be charges and are now considered defensive fouls. They couldn't hit their free throws. UNC Asheville is not a great free throw shooting team overall. On the year, they're around 69%, and today they were even worse. They finished 9 of 18, 50% from the line. So, although 9 points doesn't make up the differential here, you have to think about when they were missing those shots. Every time they were putting themselves in a position to go on a run and to close the game, they couldn't hit their free throws.
Well, and how about that? They started 0 for 6, which is hard to do, honestly.
Ooh.
And they started 0 for 6 in the time where the game was, they were up at one point, like they could have been up more. So you focused a lot tonight on the timing of when a lot of these things happen. And I do think that's really important as you're watching these games. Not all points, not all shots, not all free throws are created equal in the ebb and flow of the game. But a good win. I mean, there was a lot of concern about a hangover between the Indiana game and the USC game coming up. I thought Auburn brought the energy well. UNC Asheville hit a couple shots early. They hung in there, but ultimately,
Pember was a baller.
if we show up and defend like that, like in these kind of games, that's where everything starts. And I think the team deserves a lot of credit for they're in Atlanta, they go back to Auburn, they come to Huntsville, they're going back to Auburn for another to be locked in and focused helps when you have a super pro Auburn crowd there in a neutral site like that, obviously.
Oh
That
yeah,
was super, super helpful. And I think it accomplished all the things Bruce wanted to from a program building perspective to host a game up there. It's been a while. Um, so
yeah,
good win all around.
yeah. Good quality win. There's some things that I would like to see improved, but I think some of that's just coming on the heels of an Indiana game in which you could say there's no really way we could have improved
What's
on
at the
that
top of
game.
that list for you if you were nitpicking, like not from this game, but maybe through the first, 9 games? What are the
Oh, the main thing is continuing to hit open shots, um, particularly from three. There have been a lot of opportunities where guys are in their spot. You see Aiden just off center to the left. That seems to be a place where he gets open and just can't hit from. Um, Denver the same way too. Denver hit a great curl 3-pointer early on in the game, and then wasn't really effective from deep. He finished 1 for 4. So I would love to see us hit just a few more 3-pointers. We don't have to get to 38. 38 was a little greedy. I'll give you that. But it would be nice to see us, particularly when they're uncontested, because we
Mhm.
know these guys can shoot. And then silly turnovers. Denver Jones had a really bad inbounds pass that got where he got his pocket picked. That against a better team like Baylor, the end of the Baylor game, we got our pocket picked a couple of times that really eliminated our chances to make a strong comeback in that game. But, they're small things, they're focus things, and they're just consistency things that we hope to see grow over the course of the year.
I'll build on that. Denver, that I believe that was a defensive rebound he got, and Aiden was over there, so he's looking for his point guard, which is a good thing. But Aiden, it's kind of partially Aiden's fault too, because Aiden's leaking away from the ball, rather than you do that maybe if nobody's in between you, but otherwise the point guard has to at least get himself in position, and Denver shouldn't have thrown it. It's on him. But then the next possession, the thing I love about Aiden that I think for a freshman is so rare, he has an ability to get his eyes up early. He caught Janai Broom behind the defense as he's dribbling up the court quickly and threw a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful pass to Janai to finish. Like that is such a
When he saw the Janai's defender wasn't looking, so he knew I can put the ball here, and that guy's gonna have no idea it's coming.
and he's done it a lot this year in his first 9 games as a college player. It's really
Yeah,
impressive, and I think it gets overshadowed a little bit by the 3-point shooting, by some of the mid range smoothness that he has. And you and I did talk about with Aiden, like there's going to need to be some development on finishing at the rim as a small guard. That is a hard thing to do in college basketball among the trees. He had a couple nice finishes eventually in this game. This was not a good Aiden game, but lead the team with 5 assists,
yep,
only 1 turnover, and like he is much more well rounded than I think people give him credit for as a player.
yeah. And again, finishing with 7 points on a night where he wasn't shooting particularly well from the outside is huge for him. He got to the rack a couple of times inside, particularly later when he was continuing to see those lanes open up. I don't know if that's going to be there in conference play, but either way, it's still nice to see him recognizing those bits from the floor. And again, his passing is outstanding. You don't want to shy away from the fact that this is an 18-year-old kid going out there dishing 5 assists against a team full of seniors.
Yeah, again in half the game, So now that's more normal because Trey and him are usually splitting minutes. I do think that bodes well for us down. Obviously, you want to stay healthy and avoid injuries, but just the minute load is just not that high. Um, I think it's. I checked the other day. I don't know if it's Jalen still playing the most minutes on average. I think that's probably still true. I'll double check, but nobody's
Yeah, I
playing
think that tracks.
ridiculous amounts of minutes so far. Now, it is going to be interesting. I feel like every year we get to conference play, and depending on how the team's doing, people are like, oh, we can't play 10 or 11 guy. We got to shorten it. We got to shorten the bench. We got to play 7. We got to play 8. We don't trust those guys. They're not good enough. And Bruce is pretty committed to at least 8 or 9. I mean, there's some years where he may not go 10, but this year I really think he's going to roll with it. But it is going to be the next thing for us to track after this USC game. That's obviously a big one we can talk about for a minute.
Well, before
Um,
we get into that, we do have Tony Barnhart in the chat. He wants to talk about Chaney Johnson just a little bit more, aka 31 Chains. He came into his own a little bit tonight, seeing him playing well. You just mentioned that Jalen right now is currently playing the most minutes on the team. Do we think that Chaney is continuing to evolve, or has he peaked yet?
I think he's getting more and more comfortable. I still think there's times where he's struggling. Not struggling, maybe just finding his way. It is a big jump he's made. Um, but he did look really good tonight. He had a great dunk. He's an athletic dude. I think he's going to look better in these kind of games. He's not as all around of a player as Jalen. He's not making the passes Jalen's making. He's not. He just hasn't played as much basketball at this level, and that's not a slight against him. I just think that's the rip. But I do think he's a better option than Chris Moore playing backup at the 4, which is kind of what we had to do last year. So
Yeah, I think Chris Moore continues to be great energy to start the game. He's pretty savvy. He did have 2 steals tonight. So he continues to be able to jump into passing lanes and do some of the things that you would hope an older player can do that's got a frame like his. But it just seems like overall Chaney is finding his positioning offensively in a really important way. And we had already a 14-point game from Chaney this season. I don't think we've seen Chris Moore hit double digits yet.
no, probably won't happen, honestly. I did want to
Yeah.
correct myself. Aiden and Janai are playing 1.5 more minutes than Jalen, but those are your top 3. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Tony Barnhart also wants to shout out our MVP pick for the game, Chad Baker-Mazara.
Yes.
Secret weapon, silky smooth stroke from 3, defended and rebounding well. We already talked about how he led the team in rebounds tonight. Yeah, I'm comfortable with Chad Baker-Mazara as the MVP.
He is kind of a secret weapon. I kind of, first of all, I thought it was really funny because when you said Tony Barnhart, I thought it was Tony Barnhart, which is a media personality, and I got excited for a minute that Tony Barnhart would be checking in on our live stream. But
Can you imagine?
yeah, that would be weird, actually. Wrong sport.
Oh, Ryan
But
just jumped into the chat here. Ryan, are you going to add to the MVP discussion?
oh, he might. But I do see. I think he's onto something with Chad Baker-Mazara. Like I think you hit the nail on the head. Like he is one of those guys that, like, if he can give us a stretch like that, in some of these key games, like that is massive, especially on the offensive end, to get that kind of contribution from him. And if he can continue to round out into being a solid defender, making some of those havoc plays like his buddy KD, and using that length to his advantage, you love to see the rebounds come from him like today. He really he may be one of those guys that has the biggest variance on how high the ceiling is on this team. I think that's fair to say, honestly. If he could kind of take that 3 position by the horns and bring that kind of production on a consistent basis, that would be huge.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely saw that emerge from Flanagan last year, and then he wound up taking over as the starter in the 3 positions later in the SEC play. So it will definitely be interesting to see where CBM ends up. So now that we're kind of wrapping up this game, we didn't learn too much, but we got to see some exciting play, and we got to see some excellent homecoming from Chaney Johnson. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, or the Trojan in the room, if you will. USC at home. Bronny James, Isaiah Collier in Neville Arena. Matt, can we do it?
Of course we can. We're in Neville. We can definitely beat them. They're good. They've got some players. They've been struggling. I mean, I think they will probably look at this like a huge quad 1 opportunity to come in here and get a big win. That's the danger of playing at Neville, because everybody sees it as kind of a big opportunity. But we have that big streak on the line of non-conference wins at home.
Yeah, sadly, it's only at 48 right now, so this will get us to 49. It would be really cool if this was getting us to 50.
I know. This is a big one. It's a risky one. It's a tough game. I think it's another opportunity, kind of like the Indiana game, to give us a good win to feel good about where we're moving forward in this season. I think it's going to be a great crowd. I hope so. I know it's like off season with students. Curious how the student section is going to be. Curious how the whole vibe is going to be. I know this game is super expensive. I saw the secondary ticket prices are crazy. It's going to be a fun Sunday in Neville for sure. It kind of feels like when you look beyond that game, there's some decent teams, but there's obviously nobody else in the non-conference that's as big of a name as this. This is kind of the peak of the non-conference schedule. So can Auburn continue to build on momentum, get that win? I really think that could help launch, into those final non-conference games.
Yeah, Ryan here in the chat seems to think that we'll start out with a big lead, let them back into it, and then pull it out of the end. Tony Barnhart says Nev's going to be turned up. A lot of recruits will be in attendance from all sports to experience the Auburn family atmosphere. And, USC is going to be playing in their first true road game in a little while. They played in Vegas to start the year against Kansas State. They were at the Rady Childs Invitational Tournament where they beat Seton Hall and lost to Oklahoma, who it turns out is a sneaky good basketball team. They were back home for a win over Eastern Washington. Then they were back in Vegas where they lost to number 11 Gonzaga by 13 points. And then they dropped a stunner at home to Long Beach State. So you got to think they're going to come into the game smarting a little bit. And like you said, there's going to be a great big target painted around this game. Like, hey, we can still right the ship. This win is going to mean something in March if you can pull it off.
Absolutely. It should feel, I mean, it should be a significant game. It's obviously one of those fun non-conference matchups we've wanted to see more of. Getting to play a name brand like USC, getting them to come to Auburn for a basketball game is a big deal still in this phase of our program. And I'm really excited to see it. Now, did we played them last year, correct?
We did, and Boogie Ellis absolutely torched us. He's currently averaging 21.4 points a game for USC, and I'm gonna pull up the score from last year, but I'm pretty sure he dropped 28 against us.
Hmm. Hmm. Tucker Robinson hitting me with a great stat or question about when was the last loss, non-conference home loss. I looked this up and I'm trying to remember what it was. I
It
think
has
this
been
goes
a
back to
minute.
2016, 2017. It goes way back. Uh, I'm gonna put research on that right now on my phone. But
But
that's a good.
I'm pulling up the box. I'm pulling up the box score from last year's Auburn USC game. And yes, Boogie Ellis, 28 points, 9 of 15 from the floor, 8 of 10 from free throw. But you have to remember that was a game last year where we played without Wendell Green Jr. That was one of the emerging moments for Trey Donaldson. Zep had to play some backup point, but Trey was our starter for that game. He hit some great 3-pointers. He really proved that he could run the Bruce Pearl offense. And I think that went a long way towards putting Trey where he is on this team today.
I'm engrossed. I'm engrossed in trying to
Yeah,
find.
Ryan saying that our guys are looking for a revenge game. We should have won that game. And frankly, I agree. We spotted them way too much of a lead at the half, but we absolutely played tough in that second half. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's right. No, Trey hit some threes to close out. We were actually up at the half 39-35, and USC would go on to win 74-71 in Los Angeles. But yeah, you think about where Auburn is as a program. And if you were in school when I was in school, you remember the opening of Neville Arena back when it didn't have a name. And we lost our first 3 games in our home arena, our brand spanking new basketball facility. And now we're at a place where we've got this primetime team with the son of LeBron James, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, coming into our building to play a game. It's been a pretty incredible transformation to watch the last 10 years under Bruce.
What percentage of chance do you give LeBron to be there? I don't think it's very likely, right? There's no way because
No,
he's already.
I don't think so. It's a long trip. We've seen that they're kind of using Bronny a little bit conservatively. He was there for his debut, which was very obviously a big deal. But I think they're going to be pretty sparing with him while they're continuing to monitor his health. And it's a long way from Los Angeles to Auburn, Alabama.
All right. I don't know if this is it, but back in 2015, we lost to Colorado at home.
Ooh, I think I remember that game.
There might be another one. Don't quote me on that. But
No, no, no.
all that to
Quote,
say,
quote Matt, quote Matt. Get in the
Jackson
comments. Send us a message on Facebook, Twitter. Let us know.
Jackson loves his streaks. Jackson loves his random little factoids very much so. And this he wants to keep this non-conference home winning streak alive. It is hard to do. It may seem like, oh, we're playing lesser teams. We have a good program. All you got to do is watch any college basketball around the country every given night. It's not guaranteed. It's not assumed. And it says a lot about the consistency of this staff and getting guys ready for matchups that are kind of one-offs, right? You're not playing these teams at other points. You don't have a matchup. You don't have a history necessarily with certain coaches or players or programs when you're in these matchups. I think we do a great job of scouting. And even again tonight in this UNC Asheville game, I think we did a great job shutting down a lot of things they wanted to do. We made life very difficult for them. Would love to know who had the scout for this. Bruce he always tries to give his coaches credit in the press conference, but haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, what a game. We've got a bigger one coming up Saturday or Sunday rather. And Friday, if you are a fan of the Jungle Auburn podcast, be sure to tune in. We already did the live interview live on YouTube, but if you weren't able to catch that, you'll be able to catch the audio version of it available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you follow us on social media at the Jungle Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, we'll post the episode there. You're going to be able to check out Matt and Jackson's interview with legendary Auburn coach Cliff Ellis.
just one side note. Again, history of the podcast, right? This is just a fan podcast that we just started doing 2 years ago. Jackson and I have had probably more fun doing the interviews than anything else. We had Sonny Smith, who's a legend since 1978. Our Auburn coaches are Sonny Smith, Tommy Joe Eagles, who tragically passed away, Coach Cliff Ellis,
Man.
Coach Cliff Ellis, who we just interviewed, Jeff Lebo, who's next on my list. He's an assistant at North Carolina. He was the coach when I was in school. I want to talk to Jeff Lebo. I personally,
Lebo's Lunatics, baby.
I personally think we should try to get Tony Barbee on here. Like I would love to just check off all the boxes, get all the coaches.
If we're gonna get Tony Barbie on here, we're gonna have to change the tag on this podcast to explicit.
Well, we'll see. I'm just saying it's so cool for us to talk to these guys, and you'll have to bear with maybe a little audio. I know Ben's gonna try to clean some of it up, but like Coach Ellis was very generous with his time, and he really enjoyed getting to talk about his days at Auburn, and I think had a lot of fun bragging on his players and his teams that I think he still feels like don't get as much credit as they probably should. And that's why we want to honor the 25th anniversary. We love Beardies. We've tried to push that. And you mentioned that 2003 game. Coach Ellis talks about that in that Syracuse game. He's like, dude, we lost by 1 to Syracuse. They won the national championship. If we had 30 more seconds, we would have gotten them. That's what he said. So that's a little sneak preview. So definitely check that out. And then we'll be back for the USC game, obviously. And we will hopefully be able to do like a pre-SEC episode at some point before we get to SEC play, which starts January 6th.
Oh, we will for sure. I think the Penn game is in January. So we have one last non-conference game on the other side of the new year. And then we'll get geared up for conference play. Matt's favorite time of the year.
It's looking good. It's looking good. Our Ken Palm's 11 or 12 in the country. Who cares if we're ranked? Our metrics are solid. We survived a bad loss against App State. It hasn't hurt us much. So you love to see it. Hopefully we can keep building on some of this momentum. I really like how the guys are playing right now.
Me too.
Hit
your free throws.
What?
Hit your free throws.
Hit your free throws, Coach Ben Young says. We all need to find people who care about us as much as Ben cares about free throw percentages.
That's right, baby.
Anyway, War Eagle, everybody, thanks for joining us in the chat, and we'll be back on Friday with the interview, and then on Sunday after the USC game. War Eagle.
War Eagle, Matt.